What's up guys, my name's Stu, and today we're going to be looking at my all phaser damage ground build. Last month during my birthday stream on Twitch, some drunk guy yelled at me about how there's literally no information on ground builds whatsoever. And while this really isn't true, it did make me realize I haven't put out my own ground build yet, so we're going to take the chance to do that. Here it is, my phaser damage ground build. I call it that because, well, nearly everything on the build does phaser damage. I'll start with the kit modules and then work my way down. First, I have Mud's time device. This module is nice for your survival, but I'm mainly using it to help with the cooldowns of my other kit modules. This is the only kit module on the build that doesn't actually do any damage. Covert Assault Drone deals some additional phaser damage every time I fire my own weapon. Despite being called a drone, Covert Assault Drone doesn't actually work like normal drone kit modules. Instead of being a separate entity like most drones are, it actually works like a secondary weapon that fires every time you fire your own weapon. The Agony Field Generator has been a popular kit module for a while now. It's a big collapsing AoE that does impressive amounts of phaser damage to anything that touches the field. This also applies a phaser damage resistance debuff to your enemies. This is kind of the reason why I've revolved the whole build around doing phaser damage. The downside of this one is that its cooldown is kind of long, which is why I'm using Mud's time device to shorten that up a bit. Ambush Turret Fabrication. This is a favorite of mine. It spawns 2 turrets that just unload phaser damage like crazy for about 8 seconds and then they disappear. Beam Turret. This is probably the oldest piece of gear on this build. It's similar to Ambush Turret in that it spawns a turret that spits out phaser damage. The difference is that this one does less damage but actually sticks around for a full 3 minutes. I like this one because you can just spawn it, leave it alone, and let it do its thing. This particular beam turret is actually the version from the Fleet Embassy, meaning it also uses a plasma flamethrower at anything that gets too close. It kind of breaks the whole phaser damage theme of the build, but they're still better than the original ones. I should also probably note that this is the only kit module on the build that is exclusive to engineers. Tactical and science characters could get away with something like Agonizer Brain Scramble or the new DOT-23 drones. Both of those deal phaser damage and are universal kits as well. For the kit frame, I am using the Starfleet Frontier Engineering Kit. The proc on this kit frame gives me a chance to randomly spawn another beam turret. Since I'm a Federation character, that beam turret is also going to do phaser damage. Though I do wish it had more than a 12.5% chance to proc. It's not a lot. For armor, I am using Burnham's CQC Environment Suit for its buffs to crit chance and crit severity. The run speed buff is kind of nice too. You might be asking why I'm using an environment suit 100% of the time, especially when there's a normal combat armor version. Stats wise, the only difference between the two is that the regular combat armor has a plus 20 to damage resistance. The important part is the crit chance and the crit severity. A little bit of extra damage resistance really isn't going to help me in the long run, so I'd rather just have the convenience of always having an EV suit on me. For shields, I'm using the Nakul Temporal Operative Personal Shield for its time slip ability. This thing is great for survival. When your shields drop below 10%, it automatically activates time slip, which creates a sort of distortion clone of yourself. The distortion stays active for up to 10 seconds, and you will be completely immune to damage for that duration. The distortion can be killed, but honestly, I've never seen NPCs actually target the player's distortions, so that 10-second duration of immortality is pretty much guaranteed. In the weapon slots, first I've got the Nakul Temporal Operative Assault Weapon. This is here purely for its 2-piece with the shield, which gives you some extra crit chance and crit severity. This is not here to be used as a weapon. As you can see, I haven't even bothered to upgrade it. It's just here for the set bonus. This is a phaser build, so really you can get away with whatever phaser you want in the other weapon slot. I'm using the Type 2 phaser compression pistol from the Low-Buy store because I like this gun. It's got a nice firing rate on it, it's got some decent power behind it. I'm also a big fan of the Discovery phaser rifle from the Low-Buy store. It's a really hard-hitting weapon thanks to its unique firing mode, so that's also a great choice. But like I said, any decent phaser weapon will do. In the devices, first I have large kit over boosters. These will give you a little extra kit performance and some extra recharge speed on your kit modules, though not gonna lie, I almost always forget to use these. Miniature Alachi Walker. This is one of the best combat pets in the game, so of course I'm using it. It does break the theme a little bit because it deals disruptor damage, but there aren't any combat pets in the game that deal phaser damage yet, so this'll have to do. Shard of Possibilities. This is kind of like a cheap version of Security Team. It spawns 2 Quantum Shadow versions of yourself, and since this is a Federation character, they'll be doing phaser damage. The Rainbow Tribble. This gives you a buff to critical chance, ranging between 2.5 and 12.5% based on how many other team members are using it. Many would probably recommend the Gambling Device over this, but honestly, I can't be bothered with the Gambling Device due to the fact that it fails half the time you use it. Too much of a hassle for me. I'd rather have the guaranteed buff of the Rainbow Tribble. In my skill tree, you can see I've got everything dedicated to weapons proficiency and kit performance expert. These are the 2 most important skills for ground. The other 2 are just shields and health. I wouldn't bother with them. For my primary specialization, I was using Temporal Operative. Temporal has some nice skills that benefit your kit's powers and recharge speeds, mainly inevitability and modular momentum. For secondary, I was using Command Officer. I was using this on the recommendation from Augmented Dictator Games. He thinks the buffs you get to Expose Chance, Exploit Damage, and All Damage are more beneficial than the cooldown bonuses you get from Commando. I should point out that these specializations are just used for my ground build. I know most people prefer to stick to their space specializations when doing random TFOs. Don't worry, you'll be just fine using those as well. In the personal ground traits, first we have Adaptive Offense. It's a critical chance buff that turns into a crit severity buff, and then back. You guys have probably seen the space version of this trait used on a lot of DPS builds. Assault Drone Fabrication. This is an engineer exclusive, and it gives my support drone a secondary wide beam attack, making it a little bit more effective in combat. Creative for the extra kit performance. Dulce et Decorum Est. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a bonus damage buff until you get defeated, and then it turns into a damage resistance buff until you change maps. Field Technician for the Kit Readiness buff. Kit Readiness improves your kit module cooldowns. Hive Mind gives a bonus damage buff for every teammate that's within 20 meters of you, and that buff is doubled if that teammate is also using Hive Mind. This is a great trait for everyone to be using. Orbital Devastation. This is another engineer exclusive trait, and one that is definitely a must-have. It turns your orbital strike into orbital chasing beam, so instead of one quick strike that your enemies can run out of, it turns the ability into a sustained beam that will chase enemies as long as it's active. Technophile for its large but short buff to kit performance. Superior pistol training because I am using a pistol at the moment, though you may want to use assault training or rifle training depending on the kind of gun you're using. And Serenity for a little bit more kit performance. I should note that since the Far From Home lockbox came out, I've replaced these last two traits with Bond with Life and upgraded gear. In the ground reputation traits, I'm using Deadly Aim for the crit severity, Tyler's Memories for the bonus damage to my weapons, Omega Weapon Proficiency for more bonus damage to my weapons, Magnified Armaments for bonus damage to everything, and Lethality for crit chance. For my active ground duty officers, first I have Neil Faulkner, who's giving me a little bit of extra damage against the Borg. This buff is also applied in space, so it's really just here to help with my ISE runs rather than to help my ground build. Next is Elder Malakatan. I think I pronounced that right. He's basically a better version of Neil Faulkner because his buff is applied to all enemies and also works in ground and space. Next is an Assault Squad officer that gives me a stacking crit chance buff every time I fire my ranged weapons. An Armory officer that gives me a chance to spawn some extra beam turrets when I spawn my own turrets. Sadly, this only works with beam turret and will not work with the ambush turrets. I also wish the chance to trigger was a bit higher. 20% isn't much. A Fabrication engineer that spawns extra support drones whenever I spawn a support drone. And a transporter officer that decreases the recharge time of my ground combat pet devices and my consumables. Though since the Far From Home lockbox came out, I have replaced this last one with Schroeder, the randomly transporting Saurian, because, since this is a Fed character, he does phaser damage. And if you remember, this is a phaser-themed build. There are some downsides to this build, one being the time it takes to deploy some of these kit modules. I'll get to more on that during the Parse Analysis. Another is fighting the Borg. Obviously the Borg can easily adapt to phaser damage, so when fighting them I have to switch to a non-adaptive weapon like the Tommy gun or Cochrane shotgun. I also swap out Covert Assault Drone when fighting the Borg because since it's not a separate entity like most drones, that phaser damage will count toward you, meaning the Borg will easily adapt to it. For this video I'm just going to show you the bug hunt recording, but for the actual Parse Analysis we'll be going over both the bug hunt and transdimensional tactic runs I did for this build. So let's move on to that.
fissure in the rock. Be careful. I don't know what's waiting for us at the bottom. According to our scans, there's a tunnel under us. Give me a moment. I'll clear a path. Fire in the hole! Watch that first step. Cover me! This is it, the center of the...
535 damage per second on Bug Hunt Elite. Not gonna lie, I was a bit disappointed with those numbers, especially when looking at the scores of the rest of the team. I think part of it's the animation that some of these kit modules have. Agony Field, Beam Turrets, Ambush Turrets, even the proc on the kit frame. They all force you to go through this somewhat lengthy animation where you kind of crouch down and deploy the turret, and you're stuck in that until it's over, and I think that animation is what's costing me some of this DPS. Cause while I'm stuck in that, there are 4 other high damage builds that I'm teamed with that are taking up all the DPS. It's the same thing in Transdimensional Tactics. Nearly 700k isn't bad, but I mean, look at the rest of the scores. I think I need to rethink some of these kit module choices. I might need to focus on something that deploys a bit quicker. Yeah, that's the build. I hope it helps you in putting together your own ground build for your character. If you're looking to make something a bit different, I do plan on making more ground builds in the future, so keep an eye out. You can also check out the channels of my friends Q Continuum, Ares Productions, or Augmented Dictator Games. They've all got a couple ground builds on their channels, so I'll link their channels down below. Anyway, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm, and my fledgling little YouTube channel can use all the help it can get. My name's Stu, and I'd like to apologize for the quality of this video. A friend hooked me up with a new webcam, so now all of you are going to be forced to look at all of this in full 1080p. Sorry.